Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Casey was the sweet and shy girl. She was walking down the street, holding a textbook in her hands. Studying was easy because she was very responsible, and at the university she was loved by her teachers for her malleability. On the way, she decided to go to a very cozy cafe. The summer terrace was of unreal beauty. There were tables outside with perfectly laid out tablecloths. They were complemented and gave incredible coziness vases with fresh flowers. The air smelled of spring. It was warm, so the girl decided to stretch outside to study before lectures. Today she didn't need to hurry. There was only one exam on the schedule for which she was responsibly preparing. Casey sat down at a table. The waiter immediately approached her. "Good afternoon, what will you order?" asked the young guy. He smiled very politely. "Good afternoon, can I please have a piece of honeydew and a glass of water?" asked Casey. "That's all." The waiter was surprised. He changed dramatically in his face. Casey said shyly, "Can I get you some tea or coffee?" With the same surprised face, the waiter continued to look at the girl. "You see, I don't have a scholarship until a week from today." "Thanks, just water. I'll get it right away." The waiter left. Casey opened her textbook and started reading to review what she had learned. She didn't have much money left, but she had been craving something sweet since morning. She loved honeydew. Casey's mother made it not only on holidays, but also on ordinary days to please her daughter or just to cheer her up. Her reading was interrupted by loud music. Casey looked up and saw that a very beautiful and apparently quite expensive car was parked near the cafe. The girl didn't know much about them because there was no need to. Her family lived modestly. Her father didn't have a car. Therefore, Casey just continued to watch with interest. A young boy stepped out of the car. His hair shimmered in the sun and was very carefully styled because it didn't even develop in the wind. Casey thought to herself that it turns out guys like to use Fen too. She couldn't hold back a smile. It was apparently the young guy wearing nice clothes that also caught Casey's attention. He looked around the area and headed towards his friend who was standing outside the cafe with a camera in hand. They headed for a table outside. Casey saw that it had a sign on it, reserved. She thought to herself that it must be really nice to be well endowed. You don't have to worry about the scholarship being a week away and having to be very frugal with your money. A waiter immediately came to their table and brought coffee. Casey realized that they were frequent guests here. She herself rarely went to caves, only in exceptional situations, when she wanted to eat something delicious or drink green tea with honey. And her parents lived modestly. All their lives they worked at the local factory. Her father quit when her mother passed away. He decided he could no longer work in a place where everything reminded him of the woman he loved. They loved each other very much, lived soul to soul, and never quarreled. At least, Casey never saw them in a bad mood. Her childhood was the best, and one that would forever remain in her memories. When her father quit his job and went to work as a bus driver, Casey decided that she would help her father. The girl studied well at school and managed to enter the budget, so that she was paid a scholarship. She did not. There are different interests. So what's the problem? Tony wondered. He looked around, but Casey didn't catch his eye. That's the thing. I used to only read about where to go on weekends or after work. What fairs or exhibitions are organized in the park. Apparently, people are no longer interested in such entertainment. I don't know how to do anything else. Barry looked frustrated. He didn't like difficulties or changes in his life. That's why he stayed in the same place, living a monotonous and boring life by Tony's standards. Come on, you just don't want to get out of your comfort zone. Tony decided to admonish his friend. That's what my parents always said when they were being so hard on me. I'd love to, but I don't know. What if it doesn't work out? What are we gonna do then? Barry tried not to show his real emotions, so as not to show his friend that he was very afraid of losing his usual place of work. Unlike Tony, his parents didn't give him money. That was why he made his own living. If you think like that, you'll definitely get nowhere. Tony looked around. Listen, why don't you write about girls? You're serious about girls? Barry looked at him with very surprised eyes. He thought Tony was just laughing at him. No, I'm serious. Write about girls. Look, there's a story for you. Write about the ways you can win girls' hearts. It's all standard, so it's not gonna be a problem. I think I'm gonna get fired for sure after this article. Barry smirked. He really thought his friend was joking, but from the expression on his face, it was clear that he was being serious. You can win any girl nowadays. The main thing is to immediately realize who she is and what she is. There's a girl with glasses sitting to our right, a typical office manager. She came out to drink a delicious coffee and work in a beautiful environment. It's classic. I think a girl like that needs a new experience. She will be yours if you invite her to the pool on the weekend, take her for a walk in the park, or have a picnic near the forest. A couple of such outings and she is yours. The main thing is that they were romantic and she had something to tell her friends about. I'm sure they live just as boring lives. You're a connoisseur of women's hearts. Barry laughed. You should be listening to me. Look, she's in her 30s, but she's obviously here to meet someone. Tony pointed toward a middle-aged girl who was wearing bright makeup. Her red lips were visible a mile away. No one like that I'd definitely go for. Barry started nodding his head. That's understandable, but let's get to the point. A girl like that needs what? Stability. It's as simple as that. She needs a beautiful courtship that you take her problems on yourself, providing her stability in life. Well, all his whims, hired the best tutors for his studies, so that their son was the best. That's how it turned out that now his self-esteem was so high that he was fully confident in his abilities without a drop of doubt. By $1,000, answered Barry. He didn't have that amount of money. He hoped that Tony would not like such a girl as Casey, and accordingly, he could get a good profit on his salary and pay off the loan. There would be money left over for the cafe to celebrate his victory in the dispute. Barry was already imagining his jubilation, but he was interrupted by his friend. Isn't that a bit much for you? Where are you going to find that kind of money? Tony was surprised at such a bet. It's just right. I'm sure it's you who'll owe me the money. I don't think so. Tony replied with a smirk. So I have one guess. How about I bet you $500 she's mine? I'll lower the bet because it's unrealistic for you to find me that much money, and I'm not willing to wait years for my winnings for a bet. All right, let's do it, but only until the end of the day. Barry started rubbing his hands together. I haven't been interested in one-day bets for a long time. Let's bet I can do it in a week. Well, then, time's up, replied Barry. You have exactly 7 days. If you fail, then I expect my money. Don't be so cocky, because I'm very determined. You're the one who's already starting to save and work harder, because I'm not waiting. If I win the whole amount at once. Tony adjusted his shirt and headed over to the table where Casey was sitting. He sat down next to her and began to smile. Casey looked at the guy in bewilderment, who seemed too cocky at once. Just like that, he decided to come over without asking, to sit at her table. What? She asked indignantly. It's nothing. I just really liked you. Tony kept smiling as well. At that moment, he thought that it wouldn't be so hard to deal with Casey. The girl rolled her eyes in frustration, took a deep breath, and continued reading the book further. She didn't have the time or even the desire to be distracted by new acquaintances, and Casey was the kind of girl who didn't get acquainted in cafes, and even with such self-confident guys who considered themselves superior to others. You're studying for your exams. What subject? Tony said a topic that would interest Casey to get her talking. He needed to show Barry that he had absolutely no chance of winning this argument. He tilted his head and saw the title of the book, Economics and Finance. I see, you're an economics major. Casey looked up. She was already looking at Tony with annoyance and didn't like being called out. Well, I can see that you're probably studying for the exam. Yeah, I'm sure I'm right. Tony leaned back in his chair confidently, waiting for an answer. What are you, psychic? Casey decided to put the insolent guy in his place. Maybe I am. Let me guess, you probably have an exam the day after tomorrow and you're sitting here studying for it. Was Tony watching the girl's reaction? No, tomorrow then. What's today? He continued to guess. Casey closed the book and Tony immediately snatched it up and put it down beside him. I can reassure you that you don't need to study for this exam anymore. Consider it an A on your transcript. And if I don't? Casey asked. What guarantee do I have that I'll get that grade? Well, I'm not making any guarantees. But if I'm wrong, I'll come to the institute to pick you up. We'll go to a park or a cafe together. I'll treat you to the most delicious dinner or dessert. And as a bonus, just for you, I can fulfill your every wish. Anything you want. Really? Casey couldn't contain her emotions anymore and started laughing. You're so confident. Aren't you scared? She asked. No, what should I be afraid of? Tony was surprised. What if I want something and you can't fulfill it? Casey looked into Tony's eyes, waiting for his reaction. Now she wondered how he would respond. There's no such thing. I can do anything one could wish for. Tony was so sure of himself that he glowed with the realization that he was the son of wealthy parents. He had always gotten the best of everything and was not restricted financially. His father had given him a very expensive car so that his son would not walk or take cabs, let alone use public transportation. He felt that his status did not allow his son to be any different from anyone else. They had a staff who were responsible for the cleanliness and order of the house on weekends. Even a gardener came to take care of the lawn and flowers. They lived very well. Many people envied such a luxurious and carefree life for Tony. Even his friend Barry, who skillfully hid his emotions. In his heart, he wished he could live the same way and have no worries. Well, we'll see then. Casey smiled. She had not expected that such a simple proposal would arouse such interest in her. She was also flattered that a guy like Tony was paying attention to her, and usually no one ever got to know her. Then give me your phone number and I'll call you tonight. Do you want to go on vacation? I can offer you a great option, a restaurant on the waterfront. It's very beautiful there, it's fun. Have you heard about the discos there in the evenings? No, Casey answered. How have you never been there? Tony was surprised. He was used to socializing with girls who liked partying and disco going to nightclubs. With someone like Casey, he wasn't interested at all. He just had to, because the money argument added to the excitement. I wasn't. What surprised you so much about it? Not all people go out to restaurants and have fun. Casey was offended. No offense. Then let me show you this beautiful place tonight. You're gonna love it. And the view of the city at night, you gotta see it for yourself. So can I get your phone number? Casey opened her bag and took out a notebook. She wrote down her phone number and held it out to Tony. He struggled to hide his surprise. No one wrote their numbers like that anymore. Usually girls dictated numbers to him or messaged him on Messenger. See you tonight then. Tony took the sheet and headed for the exit. Barry was already waiting for him in the parking lot and was taking pictures of passersby. He was nervous because he didn't have much time at all to prepare the material. So, shall we give you a ride to work? Tony asked. He was smiling because he tasted victory. And yes, get the money ready, because tonight we are going to the Imperial restaurant. Tony showed the sheet on which Casey had written her phone number. Don't be in a hurry to get excited so soon. Barry didn't give up hope that he would win an argument. You have to live till the evening and then brag about the fact that she gave her phone number and agreed to go to the restaurant with you is not a victory. I'm sure she doesn't see you as her type. You're not her type of man. Come see for yourself how your money becomes mine. I will. All right, let's go. I'm gonna be late for work soon. And bring your camera. I want you to take a picture of your defeat and my victory. Let's go. I've got some other things to do. I've got to get everything done before tonight. Casey spent another half hour in the cafeteria. She repeated all the material, gained confidence, and hurried to the institute. When she came out of the exam, she was glowing with happiness, but her friend was sad because she got a low score. Are you going to retake it? Casey asked Lucy. It was her college friend. No more what? I'm not chasing these grades that no one wants. I have other plans for my life. The girl replied, and for nothing, good grades will help you to get a good job in life. Casey was sure that if she was an excellent student, she would easily get the job she wanted. That's what her parents had taught her since childhood. Oh, not that. Lucy rolled her eyes. Somebody else believes in these fairy tales. To get a good job in life, you have to marry a wealthy man. And for that, you don't need good grades at all. Joe came up to them. It was a friend of Casey and Lucy who studied with the girls on the same stream. He was calm and easygoing and often helped with notes. He liked Casey very much, but he was shy to tell her how he felt. His tactic was simple. He decided that he would help her, and sooner or later she would fall in love with him. What's up? How was the exam? Joe asked. I passed with flying colors, But Lucy got a low score. I've been urging her to retake it if she can, but she doesn't want to. And what's that? Why should I waste my time cramming? No, I'd rather go clubbing tonight. Joe, are you coming? Lucy asked. I wouldn't say no, answered the boy. At that moment, Casey's phone rang. She looked at the screen. The number was unsigned. After the exam, it had completely slipped her mind that it was Tony. She answered the phone. Hey, so you passed the exam and got an A, and now we're going out to a restaurant with you tonight. She heard Tony's voice. You're right, I got an A, but I had other plans for tonight. I don't accept any excuses, especially since you and I made plans this morning. So should I pick you up? Tony was persistent. He wasn't used to girls turning him down. Usually they follow him around, looking to meet him, wanting to get to know him. Tony's usual curiosity was at play here. I live in a dorm near the university. I'll look on the map. I don't know where it is, but I'll be exactly at 6:00 p.m. under your dormitory. Tony hung up the phone. Casey didn't have time to answer him anything. Her friends looked at her with interest. Who is it? Lucy asked, surprised. Someone I know invited me to a restaurant tonight, answered Casey, smiling enigmatically. An acquaintance? Why don't we know anything about it? Well, when will I have told you about him? He came up to me this morning at the cafe while I was sitting and reading. You didn't go there with me this morning. Yeah, sure. I'd rather sleep an extra 30 minutes than cram. How do you even get the urge to cuddle with books in the morning? Because I want to get a good education and then get a good paying job. I'm gonna help my dad. He's having a hard time on his own. Casey dreamed of a good life. So I'm sorry, but I can't go to the cafe with you tonight. You can go without me. Have a good rest. Casey hurried to the dormitory to pick out her outfit for the evening and get ready. When she lived in her village, she'd only gone to discos a couple times at school. Here it was different, special. The girls gathered in advance and from the evening made their hair, makeup, and put on their best outfits. Casey's dresses were modest, and she would never wear a provocative outfit. No, she wasn't from that kind of family. Her father was of strict conservative views. He always taught his daughter to think about her studies first, and then when she will be in the career, you can think about the family and choose a life partner should be very carefully, and in no case do not rush. After all, you will always have time to get married, but the main thing that the marriage was happy. The girl passed near the mirror. Her mood was wonderful. She was already anticipating the evening date. Casey realized that Tony was from a rich family and was not her match at all. But hope flickered in her heart. She believed the guy liked her. Love isn't a status thing. Casey wore the beautiful dress her father had bought her for her graduation when she entered the institute. He always made his daughter happy in any way he could. Casey braided her hair, painted her eyelashes and lips. She didn't have much makeup, just the essentials, in her opinion. She believed that a girl's real beauty was in her natural form. She did not understand girls who from morning till evening disappeared in cosmetologists' offices, completely changing their appearance. At 6:00 in the evening, Casey left her dormitory. Tony was standing by the car with a bouquet of flowers. She smiled and hurried over to him. Hi, you've been waiting for me for a long time. The girl smiled. No, just arrived a couple minutes ago. Tony didn't know how to act around Casey. Even with his self-esteem, he was uncomfortable. His mind kept going back and forth about the argument and how he was going to get the win. It was unacceptable for him to lose. It wasn't in his rules. Is that for me? Casey looked at the flowers. And these are for you. Tony hesitated. He didn't know why he felt so awkward. Tony thought he had to be gallant and not scare the girl away, otherwise all his efforts would be in vain. Let's go then. Yes. Casey agreed and got into the car with Tony. He carefully closed the door behind her. Do you want to go for a drive around the city? Tony suggested it. Yeah. Casey agreed. No one had ever taken her for a car ride in the evening city before. She was wildly curious to experience new sensations. Casey loved it. They drove around for about 40 minutes and arrived at the restaurant. The grounds were beautiful and well maintained. There were flowers in large wagons outside the restaurant that looked like they had been cared for hours every day. Everything was perfect here. There was a man at the entrance who greeted the guests, escorting them to their table. When Tony and Casey stepped inside, the guy immediately gave his last name and was escorted to the far hall. There was a dance floor here, and tables with cozy couches stood around it. Casey looked around the room carefully. She hadn't been in such fancy places before. "Do you like it?" Tony interrupted her. "Very much. It's so beautiful." Casey continued to look around admiringly. "It's nothing special at all. Haven't you ever been to a place like this before?" Tony started laughing. "No, why? What are you so amused by?" Casey was offended. "Imagine that ordinary people do not go to such places and many other things do not do what you do." "What do you mean?" Tony was surprised and stopped laughing. "Nothing. I guess I better go home." Casey was about to head for the exit, but Tony grabbed her arm and dragged her to a table. "Here, sit down. That's my table." "What do you mean?" "Your own." Casey looked at the guy in surprise. "Well, almost. It's always on the armor, and whenever I come over, it's always free. It must be cool to live a life like that." Casey asked. "You don't have to worry about anything. Think you even have your own table at the restaurant. Do you work somewhere?" "No, I don't work anywhere. My dad wanted me to take a job at his company, but there's no work for me there. It's not a job for me at all." "I see." Casey sighed sadly. She was beginning to be disappointed in the guy who seemed perfect for her. What could she find in him that attracted her so much? These were questions she couldn't honestly answer herself. On the one hand, she was flattered that a guy like Tony was paying attention to her, but she was aware that he came from a wealthy family. He had other interests that were radically different from her outlook on life. The evening dragged on for a very long time. At first, Casey was excitedly looking at everything around her, but then she simply became uninterested. There were guys and girls who were clearly the children of rich parents. Casey became uncomfortable in their company. Barry came to this restaurant, who was watching the couple from a neighboring table. Tony saw the looks of his friend, took Casey, and dragged her with him to the dance floor. They danced. Casey finally relaxed. She was having fun. When Tony realized that this was the perfect moment for their privacy, he dragged Casey outside. There he put her in his car and they drove through the nighttime city. Tony stopped outside a small two-story building. "Where are we?" Casey asked, surprised. She read the name. It was a hotel. "I thought it would be nice to spend the rest of the evening together." "Are you serious?" Casey wondered. She grabbed her bag and wanted to get out of the car, but Tony beat her to it, pressing the central lock. All the doors closed in an instant. "Open up. I want to get out." Casey started screaming. "Come on, don't yell." Tony tried to calm her down. "We were having such a good time together, or didn't you like it?" "I enjoyed everything. But if you think you can act like that, you're wrong. I'm not." "I get it." Tony started the car and they drove off. "Just don't yell. I don't want to get in trouble with you." Tony muttered to himself in a low voice. "Where are you taking me?" Casey was wary. She didn't know what to expect from this Tony, who thought too much of himself. "Calm down, I'm taking you to the dorm." When Tony parked outside the dorm, Casey took the bouquet and hurried out. She didn't even say thank you or goodbye. She felt bad that she'd gotten that impression, even though she'd given absolutely no reason to feel that way. When she got home, Lucy was sitting at her books. "Hi, did you guys go to the cafe?" Casey looked at her friend in surprise. "As you can see, Joe didn't want to go. He said he had important, urgent things to do. I think it's because he likes you and not me." Lucy answered and continued reading. Maybe he did have something urgent to do. Casey tried to reassure her friend. "I don't think so. What are you doing home so early? I thought I wasn't expecting you today. You're gonna be out with your new boyfriend till morning." "Don't do that." Casey felt bad about what her friend said. "Well, what else could it be? She didn't say anything to us, and I thought we were friends." "Lucy, I just didn't have time to tell you anything. I wanted to after the exam, but the phone call beat me to it. Do you want tea? I was just about to go to the kitchen. I've got a head full of textbooks too." "Of course I will," Casey agreed, and they talked for almost 200 hours. She shared the details of her unusual encounter. In the morning at the cafe, Lucy sat with a surprised face. She couldn't believe that such a guy would pay attention to Casey. After all, she was not rich, and she always dressed modestly, did not attract attention. The next day, Tony called Casey in the morning, but she didn't want to pick up the phone. She was offended, but the guy's insistence seemed sincere to her. This time he asked her out on a date to the park. Casey liked that idea the best, so she didn't hesitate to say yes. Barry scoffed at his friend that it didn't work out. Tony, on the other hand, was distraught. Time was running out and something had to be decided immediately, but he had no ideas. And apparently, Casey really was unapproachable. They spent the whole evening in the park. The girl didn't even let him kiss her near the dormitory. Tony took offense and went to a nightclub to relax. That's where he met his friend Barry. "What's up?" With a smirk asked Barry, who already read everything on his friend's face. "It's not working out. I told you this money you lose this bet." "You can't wait. I've got 5 more days." "They're not gonna help you. It's your rookie. It's never gonna work with you. Just face the fact and let's get this over with." "No, I'm not used to losing, so you got the wrong guy." He got up and walked out of the nightclub. Tony decided that the best solution would be to go home to get a good night's sleep and get into action in the morning. There wasn't much time left, and he didn't want to lose a bet like this. In the morning, Tony got out early to catch his father home. He went down to the living room on the first floor. Their au pair was just setting the table and bringing coffee. "Tony, you're home early. I haven't prepared anything for you." "That's okay. Nanny, can you make me just coffee?" "Yeah, sure." "Son, you're really up very early," said Lily, his mother, who had just come down to the first floor to have breakfast. At the sight of her son waking up so early for the first time, she started to worry. "Is something wrong?" "I wanted to talk to you." Tony looked into his mother's eyes and with confidence. "I need money." And then he continued, "But I'm giving you enough money for a month," said Harry, Tony's father, who was just drinking his morning coffee and reading the news on his phone. "I know, but I need more. I want to take a new girlfriend with me on vacation too." Lily choked and sat down next to her husband at the table. Harry tapped her back. "In that case, Tony, you need to earn your own money by now. When I was your age, I was already a freelancer and my parents didn't give me any money at all. Everything I have now, I earned with my own hard work, with these hands and this head. I can't get up that early every day." Tony replied, "I just have a different nature. I'm an owl. I have different rhythms. Maybe you can find me a job where I have to get up later. Not as early as you." "No, there isn't another one. In case you haven't noticed, we all get up early to work. One, you sleep until lunchtime, and then you just get on with life in the evening. If you want to be able to take your girls on vacation, then start working," said Lily. "Dad, why don't you give me a job? That's a manager shortage right now, isn't there?" She turned to her husband, and he nodded his head approvingly in agreement. "I see, thank you." Tony got up from the table and walked out. He headed to his room and began to think about what to do. Apparently, if he lost the dispute, his parents would not give him any more money, even to pay off his debt. Yes, and until the end of the month it is possible to live on something, and he doesn't have much left. No, it is necessary to decide something urgently. Tony thought to himself. By lunchtime, he went to the institute. He wanted to take Casey to lunch. There was a good and inexpensive cafe nearby. When Casey came out of the institute, she saw Tony. She didn't want to go near him. She was still resentful. But when Casey saw the bouquet of flowers in his hands, she smiled. There was a lightness of joy in her soul, a complete certainty that Tony definitely loved her. If he didn't love her, he wouldn't have bought flowers, wouldn't have come to visit her at the institute. Casey agreed to go to the cafe when they ordered themselves. Lunch. Tony was silent and thoughtfully looked out the window. "Did something happen to you?" Casey asked. She could see that something was wrong with Tony and wanted to help him. "I'm fine," he answered in an unhappy tone. "No, but I can see that something's wrong." Casey stroked Tony's shoulder and he pulled her hand away. "It's nothing. It's just that my dad ruined my mood this morning. He and my mother think I need a job, even though I don't see why I should work. My father's business is booming. We don't need the money. Maybe they're right. If you work, you'll become independent of them. That's very good, and you'll be able to use your money any way you want. And so can you." Tony flared up, but calmed down abruptly. He knew he couldn't show his emotions in front of Casey. He needed to look dignified, and that's when an idea popped into his head. Now he had figured out how he could win the girl's heart, so he wouldn't lose the argument. "Marry me." Tony turned to Casey and took her hands in his. "Will you?" He interjected. "I'm sorry I don't have a ring, but I promise to make it up to you. We'll pick it out together." Casey sat silent with surprise. She couldn't say a word. Only with eyes full of surprise she looked at Tony, who was waiting for her to answer. Casey continued to remain silent like that. This was unexpected and not part of the plan. But how after all they had just met, hadn't even met each other yet, they were already proposing? Tony began to worry. His hands were shaking from nervous tension. The outcome of that argument depended on the girl's answer. And then Casey answered sharply. "Yes, I'll do it. I'll marry you." "You will?" Tony was surprised. He hadn't expected her to accept his proposal. "Would your parents be okay with it? You haven't introduced us yet." "I think they'd be delighted." Tony lied because he knew his parents well. Of course they wouldn't approve of such a marriage, and Tony didn't consider Casey for a life partner. He figured he'd figure something out later and get out of the situation. The important thing was that now he had to tell Barry he lost. "Then maybe you can introduce us." Casey was really worried about that. "I will, but let's do it this weekend. They're very busy people. Trust me, I'll organize everything." Casey smiled. She wanted to share her news with Lucy, who was sure to be shocked. They sat in the cafe until evening. Casey talked about her life, how her childhood had been. The story was sad, as all the responsibilities of raising her were taken over by her father. Tony was bored while Casey talked about herself. Tony mentally imagined that he would use the money he won to buy himself a tablet. It would be a keepsake and a reminder that he would always be better than the others. "Can you hear me?" Casey saw that Tony was thinking about something. "Sure, I just think if you're my fiancé, we can live together now. Why don't you not go to the dorm tonight?" "No, I can't do that. And your parents won't like it. I'd rather go to the dorm." "Why your parents?" "I can rent an apartment and we'll stay there for a few days. And then I'll introduce you to my parents, and then you can move in with me." "That doesn't seem right." Casey hesitated. She immediately thought of her father, what he would think of such a decision. But Tony was persistent. "It doesn't feel right. You're already my fiancé, so I'm not taking no for an answer. Now we'll go to the realtors together and move into the apartment today." Casey didn't argue any further because Tony wouldn't listen to her anyway. And truth be told, she liked feeling defenseless, tender. When a man took charge, Tony seemed perfect at that moment. She stopped thinking about the fact that they weren't right for each other. Casey believed it was love at first sight, and they had it mutual. Tony took her to a realtor he knew, who offered a couple of options. He chose a small studio apartment that was near the center with an incredible view of the square. In the evening, they were already sitting in the kitchen, eating a delicious dinner ordered from a restaurant. Tony tried to make the atmosphere romantic, and he succeeded perfectly. Casey spent the next 2 weekends with Tony. On Monday morning, she hurried to the institute. She met Lucy at the entrance. "Hi." Casey was happy to see her friend because she had so much to tell her. "Well, hello, friend. I've been calling you all weekend. Where'd you disappear to?" Lucy was taking offense. She was acting out. She was about to call the police to put out a BLO. "I'm sorry, I couldn't talk. I'm getting married soon." Casey was glowing with happiness. "You're serious? That's a twist. To that guy you never introduced me to." "Yeah, he rented us a fancy apartment overlooking the square and promised me he'd introduce me to his parents this weekend. I'm so excited, even though it's 5 days away. It's all come together so fast I didn't expect it. I guess that's what true love is. Surprise, surprise." Lucy couldn't hide her amazement at what she'd heard. She would never have thought that her friend, so quiet and modest, would meet a guy so abruptly and marry him. "Aren't you guys in a bit of a hurry?" "Oh, I don't know. I feel like fate has brought us together. I've only seen that in movies and books before. Of course, it's very fast. But when you love someone, why wait so long? It's true. If you love each other, will you be my maid of honor?" Casey really wanted her friend to be by her side on such an important day. As a little girl, she used to play in the yard with her friends. They imagined themselves as brides, wearing a picture on their heads that was made from their mom's body. Casey wanted a family to be friendly, and on weekends, they'd go to the park together, spend time together. Of course, she might not have asked. It wasn't even up for discussion. Lucy interrupted Casey's thoughts. "But I still can't believe it. It's all happening so fast. When's the wedding even happening?" I don't know. We haven't talked about it yet. We'll probably go to the registry office after we meet the parents." "Great, then I have time to find a nice, fancy dress. I have to be beautiful." Lucy smiled dreamily. But just don't be conceited. On this day, the prettiest, the happiest will be me. Casey was over the moon. So now let's get back to normal. Let's go to class, shall we? Yeah, we're gonna be late. Let's go. Lucy grabbed Casey's hand and they ran to the second floor where the lecture was about to start. Tony was in no hurry. He got a good night's sleep, called his friend and made an appointment. Barry was just about to go out to the cafe on his lunch break and have a delicious coffee. Tommy was a little late for the meeting. You would have gotten there even later. Barry was angry that his friend was late and kept him waiting. I'm about to run out of lunch, and I hate waiting. Tony sat back in his chair and smiled enigmatically. Barry looked at him questioningly. Why are you smiling like you've won $1 million? Barry had no idea why his friend was in such a great mood. Come on, you're kidding me. Barry thought his friend was playing another prank, but a girl like Casey couldn't take Tony's advances seriously. I mean, they're completely different people. They have nothing in common. No, it's not like I'm a prankster. This is serious. Casey's getting ready to marry me too. You're a storyteller. Barry couldn't help himself. He couldn't bear the thought of losing the bet, but there was still hope in his heart. Do you have any proof? Why should I take your word for it? Tony smirked. I knew you'd ask for it. I know what you mean. Nobody likes to lose. But I've prepared, so here you go. He held out a phone with 2 pictures on it for Barry to make sure. These aren't photoshopped. Barry asked, do you really think I'd waste my time tricking you into photoshopping a photo? Here I am sending you the pics myself, make sure you lose my friend. So tomorrow I'm expecting my money. A notification came to Barry's phone. Tony immediately sent him the pictures. Barry opened them and started zooming in. And that's when he got really upset. The pictures were real. Okay, give me until tomorrow. I need to find the money. I don't have any savings. Okay, I'll wait till tomorrow. I'll come by your house tonight. They sat for a while. A few minutes later, Barry hurried to work. He was very worried because he simply didn't have that much money. The paycheck wouldn't come soon enough, and he couldn't give all the money. He still had a loan to pay. Barry was at a loss and decided that he should ask his friends for $250 each for a month. They would not refuse him and would always help him out in a difficult moment. Of course, getting into more debt was not in his plans, but there was nowhere to go. Barry decided not to waste time and start acting. He had no choice but to go to the institute where Casey was studying. Tony told him that the girl studied in the economics department. Barry knew the place. He drove to the institute. There wasn't a soul around. Apparently, the classes were still in session. Barry decided to wait for about 30 minutes, and luckily in 10 minutes he heard the bell ring and a crowd of students went home. Barry scrutinized the faces and then he saw Casey. She was the one Barry was glad to see. Casey wasn't alone with her friend, but that didn't stop him at all. Barry walked up to the girl. Casey, hi. Barry smiled in an attempt to get the girl to favor him, but Casey only looked at the guy with great disbelief. She wanted to leave, but interest took over, especially since this young man knew her name, and somewhere she had seen his face. It seemed familiar to her. The girl didn't remember that she had seen him together with Tony in that cafe. Hello, do I know you? Casey looked confused. She was still trying to remember how she could know him. No, besides the institute, she doesn't go anywhere else. No, we don't know each other personally, but my friend Tony has told me a lot about you. Let's step back for a few minutes. I have something to tell you. Barry tried to speak kindly to make the girl feel at ease. At that moment, he immediately remembered all his friend's advice on winning girls over. He knew that if he pressed Casey hard enough, she would simply refuse to engage in dialogue with him. Casey at this moment looked at Lucy, who was also standing with big surprised eyes. Do you need my help? Lucy asked her friend. She was worried and saw that Casey was confused. For some reason, Lucy thought about the fact that her friend had done something wrong. Maybe she was set up by her new fiancé, or maybe he's a thug. And now Casey was in real trouble. No, you can go to the dorm. I'll be right there. Casey reassured her friend. They moved away from the main entrance so as not to draw attention to themselves. So what did you want to tell me? Casey thought maybe something had happened to Tony. She looked worried. I realize you may not believe me now, but I think you should know about it. When you were sitting in the cafe, we were at the next table. We got into a conversation. I needed to write a new topic for my column. Tony suggested I write about girls, so the idea was to bet that he could get you within a week. I don't know what betting means. Is this some kind of joke? Otherwise, I just don't understand how it can be done. We're engaged. Tony proposed to me. We're getting married. In fact, he rented the apartment where we're living together now. I don't understand. Hasty really didn't know what she was talking about. Literally bet him that you'd be $500 worth of him in a week. No way. He proposed to me. We're getting married soon. There's not gonna be a wedding. How naive you are. Barry smirked. He could see that his revelation had come as a shock to Casey, and he added, "If you don't believe me, I have pictures." He held out his cell phone to her. Casey saw herself sleeping in the bed. At that moment, it was as if the ground began to go out from under her feet. Her eyes began to darken, and she looked for a bench, but they had moved farther away, so there was nowhere to sit. "Do you believe me now?" Barry kept up with the girl, who just stayed silent and stared at one point. "Yeah, I guess I do now." That was all Casey could reply to such shocking news. "So the bet was for $500? I'm sorry I had to tell you all that, but I think you should know. It'll hurt more when it turns out there's no wedding and the apartment was only rented for a week, not long term. It was all a sham." Casey still couldn't believe what was happening. "He told me he was going to introduce me to his parents. We'd have the best beautiful wedding and I'd be the happiest bride at the party. No, I still can't believe it." Casey decided she'd better go to the dorm. She needed to be alone. Barry didn't stop her. He'd done the most important thing. He thought he could help himself and get back at Tony, but he didn't know yet that he'd only helped his friend. When Casey entered the room, Lucy was scrubbing the floors at that moment. She had decided to clean up because she hadn't done anything while her friend was gone, and the room was in complete chaos. Lucy was the kind of girl who didn't have cleanliness and order at the forefront of her mind. She was more of a lazy girl. In her free time, Lucy either watched movies or went for walks. She liked to go to stores where there were regular discounts on fancy things. She didn't have a father. Her mother raised her on her own. She had to work 2 jobs at the same time so that her daughter would not need anything. When Lucy received money from her mother, she immediately went to buy herself new outfits. The girl believed that there are never too many clothes, and one should always look 100 or better 150. When she saw Casey, she was a little upset because she wanted to clean her room without any fuss. "You came back so quickly, and I thought I'd have time to clean up this mess while you were gone. I confess I didn't do anything, so I apologize for the mess." Lucy looked at her friend. Casey stood pale and staring at one point. "What's wrong with you? You don't feel well." And Casey continued to stand silently as well. Lucy walked over to her friend, took her hand and sat her on the bed. "What's wrong with you? You're not even looking at your face." Lucy was very much frightened. At first, she thought that maybe she had gotten sick. She ran to the kitchen and got some water. "Here, drink this. Maybe you'll feel better." "I don't want to." Casey barely spoke. "Why do I have to beat every word out of you? Why don't you tell me what happened?" Lucy was getting angry. They had an agreement that they wouldn't keep anything from each other. "He bet on me." "Who's that? Your fiancé? What makes you think that?" Lucy was sitting next to Casey. "I was shown the photos as proof. It all fits. I can see what all the rush was about, proposing without a ring. He proposed to me without a ring." Casey realized all the events in that moment, the sequence in which they happened, she continued. "And he didn't introduce me to his parents. I was so stupid to believe that. I knew we were different from the beginning. I thought it was true love at first sight, but it turned out he just argued." Lucy didn't know how to comfort her friend. She felt sorry for her. "Casey, she's naive, so she believes everything. Calm down, believe me, you'll have more than one fiancé and many times better than this Tony of yours." "Oh, what a girl. Who are you killing yourself for?" "I've never even met him, but I can already picture his face. His demeanor, probably a typical daddy's boy or mama's boy." "No, Casey, you need a better fiancé, and it's a good thing you two are separated. You don't know what would have happened to you if you made a mess of it, and then you'd remember it for a long time." Such consolation made Casey cry even harder. She had grown fond of Tony during those days, had grown attached to him. He was the first person who had won her heart and whom she had trusted. Casey decided that now she would go to Tony's apartment that he had rented for them. She knew he wasn't going anywhere tonight, so she would catch him for a serious talk. Lucy tried to talk her friend out of making that mistake, delete the number, add it to her blacklist, and never bring it up again. But Casey couldn't do that. She wanted to look into the eyes of the man who had lied to her these past few days, led her around by the nose. It was incomprehensible to her how anyone could call her to marry him and then refuse to go back on his word. It was unfathomable to her. Casey couldn't believe it. As she drove along, different thoughts came into her head. She hoped Tony would now say it wasn't all true and he had been lied to, framed by his best friend, or even that it was a simple prank. Casey was ready to forgive. 40 minutes later, she was already standing under the driveway. Her heart was pounding frantically and her legs were shaking. Casey couldn't push the intercom button. She was scared. On the one hand, it seemed to her that Tony, her destiny. Now she realized that he was a complete stranger to her. She made up her mind and pressed the button after all. Tony answered almost immediately and opened the door. Casey went up to the 4th floor. The front door was unlocked. She walked down the hallway, then into the living room. Tony was lying on the couch watching something. Casey walked over to him and stopped silently. She looked at Tony and didn't understand how he could do this to her. "Are your couple's classes over already?" Tony asked, not taking his eyes off the phone. "Shall we have dinner?" "Yeah, my classes are over and I don't feel like dinner. I have no appetite at all." "I do." Tony was still staring at his phone and not paying attention to Casey. She decided that now was as good a time as any to talk. She was in the mood for a serious conversation. "Tony, I need to talk to you very seriously. A friend of yours met me outside the institute today." Casey stopped talking. She hadn't even asked his name, but it doesn't matter. "What friend?" "I didn't ask his name, and he didn't tell me." At that moment, Tony laughed. "I don't see anything funny about that. He showed me the pictures. Did you have an argument with him?" Tony continued to look at Casey with a smile. He wasn't even upset because he had won the bet and the rest didn't matter. Tony had been thinking about how to break up with his girlfriend since morning. Now Barry had done all the work for him, and now he wouldn't even have to think of something. "You're already used up." Tony kept laughing at his fiancée. "Yeah, it was an argument, and I proved that any girl can be approached, even someone like you." Casey stood silent. She absolutely did not expect such a reaction and said that she was having a terrible dream and none of it was true. She would wake up and live again like before, but reality was harsh on her. Everything that was happening was for real. Casey experienced frustration and anger all at once. She was angry at both Tony and herself for being so naive and believing him. The girl silently headed for the exit. She didn't want to be around Tony anymore. She hated him and wished she could rewind the time back so that she wouldn't even meet him in that ill-fated cafe. Now she wouldn't make those mistakes again. When Casey returned to the dormitory, Lucy cleaned up, made them dinner and chamomile tea. They agreed that the subject was forever closed. Casey asked her not to remind her, and Lucy agreed that the major wasn't worth even talking about and wasting time on. From that point on, a week passed. Casey plunged into her studies and after the lecture came to the dormitory, sat down for notes and books. When she was reading, she didn't think about the situation, so it was easier. But one day when she returned, Casey abruptly felt sick. Her body softened, her eyes began to darken. Lucy saw and grabbed her friend under her arm and sat her down on the couch. She knew immediately what was wrong. When Casey took the test and saw the 2 stripes, her hands shook. Lucy looked at her friend in silence and realized that there was only one way out. She had to have an abortion. In a confident voice, she said, "You have no other option. You don't want to give birth to a child without a father and then bring it up alone, do you?" Casey was silent. She didn't know what to say because she was shocked, but Lucy didn't back down. "I think you should just tell him you're pregnant." "Casey, you realize he needs to know." Lucy persuaded her friend. She was furious. "Lucy, calm down." Casey continued to cry. "He thinks I'm a waste of time." Casey started sobbing even louder. "Come on, it's all in your head." "No, it's true. He said it to my face. A week ago when I went to talk to him." "Why did you go to see him? He should be forgotten like a bad dream." Lucy hummed, taking a cup to make her friend some tea. She discreetly added a couple of drops of valerian to it to bring her to her senses. I wanted to look into his eyes. I believed until the last minute that none of this was true. He was set up or his friend deliberately lied to him. Casey, are you that knave? Lucy put the cup on the table next to Casey. Drink. You're gonna feel so much better now. But listen to me, you have to tell him you're pregnant. I don't owe him anything. In a threatening tone, Casey replied, Are you suggesting we go back to him? Tony dumped me. He just gambled, and then he dumped me. You should have seen the way he smirked when I told him I knew everything. Yeah, he'll find a new girl in no time. I don't think he's gonna be too happy about the baby. He doesn't need one. I think maybe he does. Maybe he'll find out you're having his baby and he'll change his attitude. No and no. Tony is not the kind of man who would be happy about a baby. Trust me, I was so stupid. Casey was at a loss. So what are you planning on doing next, then? I'm gonna go to my dad's, take a leave of absence and move away. I don't want anyone to see me with a belly. I think that's the best solution right now. And then we'll see. It's not an option. You'll lose your scholarship, your dorm room, and your friends. We've only got one more year of school left. So be it. Once the baby's born, I'll make up for it. Casey cried even harder. A baby wasn't in her plans at the moment. She wanted to go to school and get a job. Girlfriend, of course I'll support you. You can always count on me in any situation. Thank you, you're the best. The next day, Casey resolutely went to the dean's office and wrote a request for a leave of absence. She was embarrassed to ask for it. The dean looked at Cassie in bewilderment. But you're doing well, if I'm not mistaken. At that moment, the dean picked up the folder and looked at the records. That's right, you're on scholarship. That's correct, but I need that time. Casey lowered her eyes. This wasn't going to be easy. Her cheeks were burning with excitement. She was hot and cold. Would you be willing to provide documentation to justify your leave of absence for the remainder of this academic year? The dean asked and looked at Casey carefully. The girl originally wanted to say that she needed time to help her father. She wanted to lie that he had a serious illness and needed round-the-clock care. But Casey didn't even think about this turn of events. No one knew it would take documentation to back it up. She cried herself to tears, not expecting this from herself. Casey, but don't cry. Tell me what happened and maybe I can help you. After all, you're a very active student, taking part in Olympiads. Our institute is now the best in the city and it's your merit. So what's up with you? I want to take a maternity leave. Casey answered the truth. She realized there was no point in lying. The truth would come out sooner or later. That's the situation. The dean was a little shocked. It wasn't that these situations didn't happen. It's just that Casey had a lot of promise. Her studies always came first. Maybe you should think about it. No, I've already made up my mind. It's for the best. After the baby's born, I'll go back to school. But you understand, it'll be almost a year. It'll be much harder to get an education, to remember the program again. I understand, but I'd rather come back in a year. How do you want it? The dean signed the application, and Casey thanked him for it. One thing was settled, and now it was left to move on. She packed her things and drove to her father's house. When she entered her parents' house, absolutely nothing had changed here. It was obvious that her father lived alone as a bachelor. The house lacked a woman's hand in comfort. Casey began to cry again. At that moment, she remembered her mother. Except that if she were alive right now, she would immediately understand, hug her, and never turn away. Casey was afraid of her father's reaction, but there was nowhere to go. Her father was coming home from work in the evening, so she had a few hours to unpack, cook, and clean up a bit. There wasn't much food in the refrigerator. Apparently, her father didn't cook, so Casey decided to make something hot, homemade to placate him. She set to work on her chores. The time flew by quickly. Casey was just finishing scrubbing the floors when the door opened. She heard a voice that sounded so familiar. Casey, it's you. Are you here? Her father threw his backpack on the floor and hurried into the living room. I'm here. Father, hugged Casey tightly, the girl cried. She told herself for a long time that crying was not necessary, but apparently, hormones made her special, sensual, and on any occasion, she began to cry. Well, why are you crying? Did you miss me? Casey's dad Rocky and started wiping away her tears. Dad, I don't know how to tell you. I wanted not to say anything yet, But I can't lie. You're going to find out sooner or later anyway. Casey started sobbing even harder. What's wrong? Something at the institute? Did someone hurt you? Just tell me and I'll take care of it. No, Daddy, it's more serious than that. Casey just stood there with her face down. She was staring at the floor, trying to collect her thoughts. I'm pregnant. She exhaled. This moment was the hardest for her. Casey squirmed, waiting for her father's reaction. Rocky stepped back and sat down in a chair. He began to clench his fists with excitement. For a few minutes they were just silent. Casey sat across from her father on the couch, but didn't look into his eyes. She was very embarrassed. When Rocky came to his senses a little, he said, Daughter, what about your studies? I took a sabbatical. I don't want anyone to see me with a belly. And then there's this. Casey was quiet again. What else? Just tell it like it is. Heavy, sighed the girl's father. I met Tony at a cafe near the dormitory and the institute. I came in the morning to eat the cake my mom always made me. But that's how we met. He proposed to me. He promised there would be a meeting with his parents. But then it turned out it was just an argument. What kind of bet? He bet on you? Rocky jumped up sharply from his chair, but then sat back down. Yes. Casey lowered her eyes again. I realize I'm guilty in front of you. I didn't live up to the expectations, but I'm not having an abortion. I've already made up my mind. The baby will be born, and then I'll go back to school and graduate. So what if I lose a year? This is all very sudden, Casey. You're very thoughtless. I didn't think it would come to this. I had every confidence in you. But I'm sorry. Casey started crying again. Where does this fiancé of yours, who is very fond of arguing, live? Asked Rocky. I don't know. He rented an apartment on the main street. That's where we've been living for the last few weeks. He probably stayed there. What do you want? No, don't go to him. No, I have to do this. Talk to him like a man. Give me the address. Rocky looked so menacing that Casey wrote him the address. All evening, her father stayed in his room. He pondered the news that had taken him by surprise. Casey was going through her school things that had been left at her parents' house. So many memories came flooding back to her. Among the old things, she found her old journal. The girl opened it and started reading. Here she wrote about her school friends and the math teacher who treated her with prejudice and put sticks in her wheels. But Casey was an easygoing girl, so she finished school with A's. Even the math teacher was envious of her stubbornness. You're doing great. And here Casey was writing about her friends from high school. I wonder how they're doing now. They've all moved away. Casey read her diary and fell asleep. She was tired. It had been a long day. In the morning, she said goodbye to Lucy. Casey lived in a small community on the other side of town. It was a long drive to the dormitory, so she asked her friend to visit her at least once in a while when she could. The girl leafed through the pages and came across her thoughts, which she wrote in her diary about her summer vacation. When her mother was still alive, Casey had gone to her grandmother's house in the country every summer. Already when she became an adult, summer memories came into her life. When the long-awaited hot days began, her grandmother was gone. That's why it was summer that made the memories so vivid, always bringing many regrets. In early June, the picture of the small village where she spent her vacations came alive in Casey's memory. Her grandmother was always very kind and attractive. She never scolded the girl, but only taught her what was right and what was wrong. She also taught her kindness, that it was important to help people when they needed it. The village was special to Casey. She loved the little houses that were set along the curved road. In the very center of the village was a church that was built out of wood. It wasn't exactly pretty to look at, but the locals regularly treated the wood to preserve that heritage. Around the church, Casey used to play hide and seek with the other children who also came to visit their grandparents in the village. Casey's grandmother's name was Annabelle, but the girl always called her affectionately Nana. She was very wise, gray-haired, long, plaintive with burning and cheerful eyes. Thanks to her, summer was a whole little life for Casey. In the village, they always went into the woods together to pick berries, and in the evenings they would sit on the porch and drink tea. In the morning in the garden, you could listen to the birds singing, which blended with the noise of the trees. Grandmother knew well all the secret signs of nature, and she taught the girl, so to speak, passed on her knowledge. Together with her grandmother, Cassie collected herbs, flowers, which they dried and cooked. The girl first learned in the village that the herbs they dried and cooked helped to cure diseases. Local people often came to her grandmother with various problems. She opened an ancient book with recipes, which was passed down from generation to generation. And Annabelle helped to cure any ailments, and people thanked her with food and various treats. Her grandmother always told her interesting stories about the past, what was in the world when she was a little girl. Casey listened with great interest and attention. Every night, Casey lay down next to her grandmother. She told fairy tale stories about love, kindness, how important it is to take care of other people, not to hurt animals. After such stories, Casey quickly fell asleep with a smile on her face. After such memories, the girl gave free rein to her emotions. She cried to the point of tears. How much she missed that time when all events were perceived differently. Her grandmother took care of her mother and protected her from all troubles. But now came adulthood. Now the village and memories of her grandmother are in the past. The diary entries allow you to plunge into the past, if only for a few minutes. All these memories were priceless treasures for Casey. When her grandmother passed away, she made a promise to herself that they would always remain in her heart. Casey wiped away her tears. Those memories were very important to her. But now she was ruining her own life. That's exactly what the girl thought. Casey was very good friends with Joe. If she missed a couple of classes because of illness, the guy always visited her, brought her lemonade and medicine, helped her with her notes. There were even times when he'd explain to her the topics she'd missed and couldn't figure out on her own. But Casey didn't have the courage to tell Joe personally that she was taking a leave of absence for a while. Instead, she asked Lucy. She herself had been ashamed to tell the reason for her absence. Most of all, she was afraid of the judgment that others would say about her. When she woke up in the morning and came out of her room, her father was gone. Rocky had left early. He woke up early and couldn't sleep a wink. All day long, Casey sat at her textbooks. She decided that she would study the Institute's program on her own, so that when the baby was born, it would be easier for her. The day went by very quickly. After work, Rocky went to the address that Casey had written to him. The man was angry, for he did not understand how it was possible to do such a thing to his only daughter. She had never done anything to hurt anyone. When she was just a child, she took pity on all the stray cats and dogs and brought them home, fed them, and then found them a family. Casey grew up to be a nice, sweet girl. Rocky walked up to the driveway and pressed the intercom button. The receiver wasn't answered for a long time, but he continued to persist in calling. After a couple minutes, a sleepy male voice answered. Yes. It was Tony, who after the party had slept off the night before. Yesterday, he had been celebrating his winnings at the nightclub with a friend who had just returned his money. They were easily earned, and Tony was not used to saving money, so he blew almost half of the full amount on entertainment. I'm here to talk to you urgently, said Rocky. He didn't immediately say it was Casey's father to get the door open for him. The man was worried that things might not go according to plan, but Tony was sleepy, so he didn't question anything and just opened the door. What kind of serious conversation? All right, come on in. The door opened. Rocky went up to the 4th floor. Tony was already standing in the doorway with interest, watching to see who the man was. Who are you? Tony asked from the doorway. I'm Casey's father. I've come to have a very serious conversation about my daughter. What's your daughter complaining about? It's not surprising. Smirked Tony. You should have raised her better. She looks like a little girl, but there's a lot of devils in the dark. Don't you dare say that. What kind of a man is that? Casey's father was angry. Yeah, I'm a normal person. It was just a sporting interest. It's no big deal. Tony yawned. He wasn't ready to start the day yet and mentally thought to himself that he would go to bed now. The conversation was too boring and uninteresting for him. How could anyone argue about attitude with a girl? What kind of new entertainment is this for the children of rich parents? Did you battle the baby too? Casey's father shouted in his heart. He was hurt for his daughter, so he decided that he would defend her honor to the very end. He had expected different outcomes from this encounter, but he didn't think this guy would be so brazen. Casey's father looked at Tony in bewilderment. Don't be upset. I know it's hard. I bought myself some fruit, some sweets. Maybe they'll cheer you up a little bit. Thank you. Casey sat down on the couch and looked at the clock. Her father usually got home at 4:00 p.m., but it was already 7 o'clock. She guessed her father was asking for the address for a reason. You got held up going to see him, didn't you? Yes, daughter, I could not go. Any father in my position would have done exactly what I did. What did he say to you? Casey couldn't wait to find out. There was still hope in her heart that Tony loved her, and when he found out about the baby, he'd immediately realize how wrong he was. But the miracle didn't happen. Casey, you need to forget about this guy. He's totally wrong for you. This guy doesn't know what it's like to be an adult. All he knows how to do is be mean and sassy. The only thing I don't understand is what you see in him. But I won't wait for an answer. Let's put it behind us and start our life as a clean slate, Rocky added. At that moment, Casey realized everything. She was in agreement with her father. It was useless to expect anything from a man who had spent his whole life sitting on his parents' necks. Besides, Tony had never taken responsibility for his own life, and he wasn't going to worry about a child, much less a child. Casey was unpleasant, but she decided that she would try her best to get through this phase and get on with her life. She now had a meaning to her life, which was her unborn child. Daughter, here's what I've been thinking. You're a little young. You don't have much time left to study. You should get your diploma, pass your exams, and then you can go into labor. That way you won't waste any time. Imagine a whole year and then a granddaughter or a grandson will be born. You'll have to take care of the baby. Time will pass and then you won't have time to study. Listen, old man, you have to finish your studies not only for your own sake, but also for the baby's sake. Casey listened to her father in silence, but she didn't agree with him. As before to study, but still will see my belly, that I am pregnant, and they will laugh at me. And let them laugh. You'll graduate. Then everyone will go away. No one will even remember it, believe me. But you'll be making a big mistake if you don't listen to your father. Casey's thinking, Dad, can you give me a couple days? I need to think about getting back to the dorm. I already told Lucy I'm taking a vacation. Okay, honey, just don't take too long. Casey couldn't close her eyes all night. She was thinking about all her options. What was the right thing to do now? Suddenly, she decided she would listen to her father. He was always right when he gave advice. In the evening, the girl informed him that she would return to the institute. On Monday morning, she went to the dean's office. She went to the door and stopped. Before knocking, she thought once more about her choice. Yes, she was ready. Casey knocked on the door. The dean was just in his office. When Casey asked if it was okay to come in, he was very excited. Casey, of course, come in. Rejoiced the dean, who was just doing paperwork. When Casey had left him a few days ago, he had stashed her sabbatical application in the bottom drawer. A gut feeling told him that the girl would change her mind, and so she did. His intuition had never failed him before. What is your business here? I'd like to ask you not to suspend me while I'm pregnant. Anyway, I've decided that I want to finish my studies, especially since the term allows me to finish the school year and pass the exams. But I might not be able to go to the graduation party. Casey smiled at the thought of holding a small child in her arms this summer. She was covered in goosebumps, and it seemed like time would drag on for a very long time. Great decision. And more importantly, a very wise one. The dean opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out an application. This is it. He smiled. Yes, it's mine. Casey recognized her handwriting immediately. It was a little jagged, not like her usual handwriting, but she'd been nervous when she wrote it. Great then. You can start studying today or tomorrow. You've only missed a few days, so you'll catch up with the program. Thank you so much. Casey was happy and hurried to the dormitory, which was across the street from the institute. When Casey entered the room, she was horrified. There was incredible chaos and disorder all around. Apparently, Lucy had completely neglected cleaning. When they had lived together, she had cleaned a little, but now she had stopped. Casey started cleaning. Just as she was putting the dishes away, the door opened. A dazed Lucy stood on the doorstep, not expecting to see her friend. Casey. Lucy rushed over to her with a hug. You've come to visit. How happy am I to see you? These few days without you, I didn't know what to do or think. I even got depressed. I'm so glad. Why are you back from lectures so early? There should have been 3 lectures by now. Casey was surprised. Lucky for me, my economics teacher took a sick day. I really didn't want to go to school today, and I was in a really lousy mood, and everything worked out so well. And you're back. That's really lucky. So will you accept me back as your roommate? Casey waved her hand toward her suitcase, which she hadn't put back together yet. Are you serious? Of course I am. You decided to go back to school after all. Lucy was jumping for joy. Yeah, my dad talked me into it so I wouldn't lose a year. You know, he's right. I'll get my degree and I'll be able to take my maternity leave. When the baby's old enough, then I can get a job. Oh, I was worried about you. I didn't even call you, so I wouldn't get caught in the wrong moment. I thought you'd call me if you needed to. It's okay. My dad, of course, was not happy about the news, but he supported me. To be honest, I wasn't expecting it. He's usually very strict, but now his support was just invaluable. So let's go and have tea. Drop this cleaning and I'll help you later. The girls with a good mood headed to the kitchen to discuss how those few days without each other had gone. Casey returned to her studies and successfully graduated from the institute. Not only Lucy was happy about her return, but also Joe, who was very upset when he found out about the sabbatical. At the end of spring, it was time for exams. Casey was already in her final weeks, but she was responsible and steadfastly passed everything that was required of her. Of course, not without the help of Joe, who helped her with her preparation. They spent a great deal of time together. At first, Lucy resented Casey for Joe not paying any attention to her. But then she got over it, and guys like Joe weren't her type. She liked more open, bold guys, so she spent more evenings in the local nightclub cafes to find the one she wanted. But she didn't have much luck with guys. Casey passed all her exams with flying colors. The diplomas were planned to be given out at the graduation party, but the girl went to the maternity hospital. She knew that this is a very risky event, so she did not buy even a beautiful dress. But she wasn't even upset. Instead of preparing for prom night, she was preparing for labor. Casey bought all the necessary things for the baby, and her father promised that the organizational aspects about the crib stroller will take on himself. Casey gave birth to a healthy baby boy late at night. She recovered very quickly and was doing well. On the third day, while she was in the hospital, Lucy and Joe came to visit her. To visit and congratulate her on the birth of her firstborn. They bought flowers, fruit, a soft toy. The girl was happy to see them. When they entered the room, Lucy could no longer hold back her emotions. "Hello, young mother." From the threshold, she solemnly declared, "We congratulate you. What can I wish you?" "Of course, health, less sleepless nights, but also patience. I don't even know what to wish on such an occasion." Lucy laughed. "Good health to the baby." Joe said and handed Casey some flowers. "Thank you very much." Casey smiled and was glowing with happiness. She was pleased that her friends were so caring. "Can I see the baby?" Lucy asked and Cassie nodded. She stood up and pointed toward the baby, who was sniffling sweetly under her side of the bed. "What a cute, cheeky little boy. Have you thought of a name yet?" Lucy asked. "Yes, I will name him Rocky in honor of my father. He's a good boy. While I passed the exams, he prepared everything, already bought a crib, organized the nursery. I have the best dad ever. You can only dream of having one." "It's true. You were afraid. You have a really cool dad. I wish I had a dad too." "Oh well, whatever. How are you feeling?" asked Joe, who was standing timidly by the window. He liked Casey all the time, but he was afraid to show his feelings. When he found out about the pregnancy, he was very upset, but he did not stop communicating with the girl. On the contrary, he helped her with her studies, so that she graduated with honors from the institute. "It's not bad already. They say I'll be discharged in a couple days. Joe, I wanted to thank you." Casey was very grateful to Joe, who stayed with her in the evenings and helped her write her term papers all school year. Lucy was bustling around the room. "So does Vases even eat here?" In a disgruntled tone, the girl muttered. "Well, at least they would have put a jar." "Oh, the horror. They know that a woman in labor will have guests with flowers. I'm going to look for a nurse and ask if there's a jar." Lucy went out into the hallway looking for a nurse. "What can I do to thank you for your help?" Casey asked. "You've done so much for me, and not just in school. You supported me in a time of need when I needed it. I'll always be grateful to you now. I don't need anything. I wanted to help you. Can I come and visit you on weekends, in case you need my help?" Joe, still standing in the same place, and his cheeks turned scarlet in a circle. "Of course, I'm always happy to see you, especially now." Joe smiled for the first time. Since this morning, he had been running through ideas in his head on how to tell Casey that he wanted to keep coming to visit them and help the girl. He liked her a lot, but he was afraid to confess his feelings, and he was in no hurry to show his real attitude too, so as not to stress Casey, who had told him many times that she was forever disappointed in people. The girl in the heat of the moment even cried that the relationship was no longer for her. Now Casey had a completely different life. When she brought home a small package and put it in the crib, her father cried with emotion. The girl didn't expect her strong, masculine daddy to be so relieved. While they were in the maternity hospital, he had bought and assembled the crib himself. Casey didn't expect her dad to be so understanding of all the intricacies and buy the right crib mattress and bedding. Everything had been done with great love. What a little one. Rocky admired his grandson, and he looked so much like me. I can't even believe I'm a grandfather now. I still can't believe I'm a mom myself. Sometimes it feels like it's not happening to me. Thank you so much. If it wasn't for you and your support, I wouldn't have made it. Your mom would be so proud of you. You're doing great. Rocky praised his daughter. You know, I was really worried about you going to school. I mean, that's what your mom wanted, and I did everything I could to make sure you had it. Rocky hugged his daughter. At that moment, he felt very happy, even though he hadn't expected to become a grandfather so early, and there was more trouble now. He decided that he would do everything possible to make sure that his daughter and grandson never needed anything. They were now his main focus in life. Casey's father had gotten a promotion at work. Now he had to work even harder, but the paycheck was nice. He would leave at 7 o'clock and return around 21 o'clock, very tired. Casey was learning to be a mother. It wasn't always perfect, but she tried. She kept to the schedule for the kids, had time to clean the house a little, prepare meals so that her father could rest immediately after work. When the father had days off, he would take his grandson and go take him for a ride in the stroller. During this time, Casey would rest or have a chance to get some sleep. She was proud to have such a father. He was attentive and caring. Every day, Casey would go with her baby to the park for a walk, sleeping in the fresh air, for her baby was her priority. That's why she got up much earlier, did all her chores so she could go out for a walk at lunchtime. While Rocky slept, she read a book. The park was close to the house. It was already summer outside. When Rocky was 3 months old, the girl went with him to the candy store to buy a cake. Every month she bought a cake. It was already her personal tradition. She walked out with the stroller, headed through the store's park. As she came past the cafe from the summer terrace, she was called. Casey had goosebumps running up her spine at that moment. She recognized the voice, but refused to believe what was happening. It was Tony, the same Tony who had become with the biggest pain of her life. How long had she tried to forget him? Crying into her pillow at night without anyone seeing. It hurt. It was a betrayal she took very hard. In the 5th month of her pregnancy, she fell into a very severe depression. It was the period of winter vacation, when everyone went home. When she lived in the dormitory, her Lucy was there to keep her from being sad and thinking about Tony. She also spent a lot of time with Joe, but over winter break, she went home to her father's house. He wasn't given any days off, so the girl was forced to spend a lot of time alone. The memories came back to life in her mind, and then she began to worry a lot. Almost nothing ate, did not go out anywhere. Her health deteriorated, and she went to the hospital with a threat of premature labor. It was during this period that she had enough time to reassess her values. She realized that the most precious, valuable thing in her life was her baby. When she had the fear of losing him, she forgot about Tony. From that moment on, she never thought of him again. It was customary to put her father's middle name on the birth certificate. It was Casey's choice. Rocky had been perfectly fine with that choice. And now, when they met on the street, she immediately decided that she would not talk to this man. The girl squeezed the handle. The stroller wanted to already leave, but it was too late. Tony ran up to her side and took her hand. Hi. He smiled like nothing had happened. I see you're you or you're not you. I don't recognize you. You've changed a lot. What did I recognize? You haven't changed. Casey wasn't in a friendly mood. She wanted to go to hell, not to see or hear that man. Her greatest fear was that the very memories that hurt her wouldn't come back. You seem oddly unfriendly. Your kid or a part-time babysitter? Tony nodded toward the stroller that Casey had swung up for her son to sleep in. Mine, the girl said confidently. I have to go. I'm in a big hurry. Hold on. Tony took her hand, but Casey yanked it away. So whose baby is this? Tony squinted his eyes in disbelief. I told you it's my baby. You don't get it the first time. But it has a father. Tony objected. I just remember your father came to me and told me you were pregnant, but I didn't believe him. So is that my baby? Casey was angry, and she wanted to say everything she'd been thinking about Tony all this time. How hurt she was. But at that moment, Joe, whom Casey had arranged to meet outside the candy store, came up to her. He saw that the girl was stopped by Tony, and approaching them, he heard Tony's question. Joe took the stroller and said, "This is my son." There was confidence in the guy's voice. Casey at this moment looked with surprise at her institute friend, who had been by her side all this time and supported her in difficult moments. And even now he shares a holiday with her every month. They drink tea and cake, take pictures of the baby to keep them as a souvenir. Casey then carefully glues them into an album and makes notes of her baby's milestones. Then I dare not detain you any longer. With the same smirk, Tony said and hurried back to his friends. He thought that meant that Casey had found a replacement for him very quickly. And he was right not to believe it then. Joe rolled the stroller and Casey walked beside him, silent. She was still mentally reeling from that unexpected encounter when they walked away from that cafe. Casey stopped and looked at Joe. "Thank you so much." The girl exhaled. "You were there for me at such a good time." "You're welcome. You know I'm always happy to help you." Casey suddenly hugged Joe and kissed him on the cheek. She was so glad he was always there for her. "Now for the cake?" Casey asked. "Sure, I got a little present for Rocky here. I bought him a swim cap." "Oh, that's so nice." "Oh, thank you. But I don't think he'll be able to swim with a swim cap for about 4 months." "Oh, well, he'll just have to wait his time." Casey took Joe's hand and they went to the candy store. She felt so peaceful. It was the feeling she always got when Joe was around.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.